I swear, the universe has a twisted sense of humor. One minute you're pulling into your driveway after another long day at work, humming along to some classic rock station, thinking about nothing more than leftover lasagna and maybe a glass of bourbon. The next, you're standing there frozen because your wife is grinning like she just won the lottery, and she's not alone. No, she's leaning against the hood of a shiny black Escalade that looks like it came straight off a commercial, tossing her bleach blonde hair over her shoulder as if she's auditioning for Most Smug Spouse of the Year. And beside her, some tall, tan clown with hair too perfect to be real. He had his arm draped over her like a prize. And to complete the circus, there were kids. His kids. Two of them. Old enough to know they were accessories in their dad's big entrance. Behind me, in the doorway, my 12-year-old son Noah stood clutching the frame, eyes wide, already figuring out what my brain refused to accept. "Mark," she said, smile dripping venom disguised as sweetness. "Meet Jason and his boys. They'll be staying here for a bit. I think it's time we stop pretending." Pretending. That's the word she chose. Like a decade of marriage was some little stage play I'd been dumb enough to act in while she rehearsed her exit lines with Mr. Escalade here. I laughed. Not the funny kind. The broken kind, sharp and hollow. Pretending what, exactly? She didn't even blink. Walked past me with Jason and his kids trailing behind, dragging in suitcases like they'd already been given a lease. My boy Noah's hand trembled on my arm. "Dad," he whispered, "why is he here?" Emily glanced back at him, that smug grin never fading. "Because he's the one keeping me warm now." That line didn't just sting. It detonated something inside me. But before I could react, Noah stepped forward. 12 years old, trembling, but steel in his eyes. He pointed at her, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. "You're not my mom anymore." She blinked. For the first time that evening, she looked caught off guard. He kept going. "I saw your messages. You told him you wanted to get rid of me because I remind you of Dad. You call me a roadblock." Jason shifted uncomfortably. Emily's face twisted from pale to red to something ugly. "You little brat," she spat. "You had no right." I put my hand on Noah's shoulder, steady, protective. "He had every right," I said coldly. "Because while you were playing house with your new boyfriend, he was watching everything fall apart and wondering why his own mother didn't love him anymore." Her eyes narrowed like I was an insect under her heel. "Oh, please, don't make this dramatic. You were boring, Mark. Predictable. I needed a man who made me feel something again." I looked at Jason, this silent, plastic mannequin with his salon hair and leased SUV, and almost laughed again. "I hope she makes you as happy as she made me. Because eventually, she'll turn on you too. She always does." Emily rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You'll hear from my lawyer. I'm done talking." But she wasn't done. And neither was I. Because while she thought she was walking into her new life with Jason and his store-brand Brady Bunch, I had already been planning. Quietly. Patiently. And what she didn't know, I'd been keeping a folder. A manila one. The kind of folder that doesn't just end marriages. It rewrites the ending entirely. The house felt like a stranger had broken in and rearranged the air. Jason was lounging on my couch, flipping through channels like he'd been paying the mortgage all these years. His kids raided the pantry as if my son's snacks had their names on them. And Emily, my wife, correction, my soon-to-be ex-wife, stood in the kitchen like she owned the place, smug as a cat with cream on its whiskers. But I didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't flip a table. Instead, I walked down the hall, calm, deliberate, into what was now officially my bedroom. Opened the nightstand drawer. Beneath old birthday cards and tangled charger cables lay the manila folder I'd been quietly filling for 3 months. Screenshots, bank statements, hotel receipts, even a few Instagram DMs from Jason, bragging to a buddy about stealing her from her loser husband. It was all there. I'd hoped I'd never need it. But hope is for people who don't see storms forming. I came back to the living room, folder in hand. Emily saw it, smirked, and asked, "What? You printing memes now?" I tossed it onto the coffee table. "Something like that." She flipped it open. The smirk vanished in half a second. "You've been spying on me," she barked. "No," I said evenly. "I've been collecting evidence." "There's a difference." Jason stood, trying to play peacemaker. "Look, man, maybe we should take this somewhere else." I cut him off. "No. You walked into my home. You dragged your mess into my family. You made it public. So let's keep it public." Emily's voice turned venomous. "You don't have a clue what I've been through. You were never there for me. Emotionally, I was dead. You just sat there, fixing things, being a good little Boy Scout while I rotted inside. I shook my head slowly. You didn't rot. You wandered. There's a difference. Jason, brilliant as always, tried to put a hand on my shoulder. You need to calm down, bro. I turned, looked him in the eyes, and said flatly, touch me again, and I'll make sure you regret it. His hand snapped back like he'd grabbed a hot stove. Noah sat on the stairs, silent, watching every move, his small fists clenched. He didn't say a word, but his eyes told me everything. He was learning. He was watching how a man handles betrayal. I gathered the folder back into my hands, slid it under my arm, and said calmly, Emily, you want out? You're out. But you're not walking away with anything but him and his kids. No house, no car, no money, just the baggage you've packed yourself into. She sneered, but I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She thought she was winning. She thought this was her grand exit. She had no idea the game hadn't even started yet. The next morning was eerily normal. Emily floated into the kitchen in yoga pants, humming, scrolling her phone like she hadn't detonated our life 12 hours earlier. Jason was gone, probably off doing whatever entrepreneurial venture he bragged about, and her new little entourage was still asleep in the guest room. She glanced at me buttering toast. You're being dramatic, Mark. Don't take it personally. I looked at her, one eyebrow raised. Personally? You moved a man and his kids into my house. That's not personal. That's public. She smirked, sipping coffee. You'll get over it. I didn't answer. Instead, I slid my laptop closer. On the screen, my lawyer's email draft waited, subject line already typed, petition for divorce, with exhibits attached. I had my evidence scanned and time-stamped, receipts, photos, messages, all neat as an accountant's ledger. I'd even added screenshots of her little, Jason makes me feel alive again texts. I clicked save. Not send. Not yet. Timing was everything. At 9:30 sharp, I drove to the bank. Our joint account balance was still fat and happy. By 9:45, I'd quietly transferred half into a separate account in my name only. By 9:50, I'd frozen the joint credit cards. And by 10:15, my financial advisor was on the phone, confirming what I already knew. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, all titled in my name. She'd never bothered to check. She just assumed. At noon, my phone buzzed. Emily, why isn't my card working? I kept my voice even. Maybe check with your boyfriend. Her breath caught on the other end. A flicker of panic. Mark, this isn't funny. I need gas, groceries. You'll figure it out, I said. You always do. Click. That evening, Jason swaggered back in like he owned the place. He didn't notice the locked liquor cabinet or the fact that the spare keys were gone. He didn't notice the faint smile on my face either. But Emily noticed. She studied me over dinner, like a cat watching a dog that suddenly stopped barking. You're up to something, she said finally. I smiled. I always was. You just never paid attention. The thing about betrayal is, it makes people sloppy. Emily thought she was clever, thought she had staged some grand escape with her new Prince Charming and his snack thief children. But liars live in the moment. Builders live in the long game. And I've always been a builder. Jason strutted around my house like he'd won a prize. He drank my coffee, left his socks in my living room, and pretended to help with the dishes once, just once, like he was trying out for Stepdad of the Year. I didn't tell him that every plate he touched was already paid for in full by me, and soon, they'd be the only things Emily could keep. Noah watched it all. Quiet, serious, smarter than most men twice his age. He didn't whine. He didn't cry. He just studied. And I'll tell you what, it broke my heart a little, seeing him robbed of innocence. But at the same time, I knew this would carve him into something stronger. Meanwhile, Emily's smugness grew by the day. She'd toss her blonde hair, scroll her phone, and say things like, Jason's kids need stability, Mark. We're blending families now, so you need to adapt. I'd nod politely. Of course. Inside, I was already counting down. Step 1 was legal. My lawyer, Marcus, was a shark with a smile. We met in his office the following week. He flipped through the manila folder, his eyes scanning receipts, texts, and photos. She really paraded him into the house? He asked, barely hiding a grin. Escalade and all, I said. He whistled low. Mark, I'll be honest, judges eat this stuff up. You've got abandonment, infidelity, exposure to the child. It's a buffet of leverage. She's not walking away with half. She's walking away with whatever scraps you throw her. Good, I said, because I'm not in the business of charity anymore. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You want to play clean? Or do you want to play brutal? I looked him dead in the eyes. Brutal, but silent. I want her to feel safe until the walls cave in. He smiled like a surgeon sharpening his scalpel. Consider it done. Step 2 was financial. I already had the account split, but I wanted more than just protection. I wanted insurance. So, I visited the construction company Jason supposedly ran. I didn't storm in. I didn't shout. I simply asked a few questions, shook a few hands, and left with something better than answers: rumors. Turns out, Jason wasn't exactly a captain of industry. More like a leaky boat with too many creditors. He owed vendors. He'd lost 2 contracts. And word was, he was funneling money through a side hustle he hadn't reported. That night, while he snored on my couch like a bear that had wandered into the wrong cave, I slipped into Emily's laptop. Same password she'd used for years, her birthday. People like her never change the locks. They just repaint the doors. In 10 minutes, I had copies of her emails, her bank logins, and a string of messages with Jason that would make any divorce judge laugh out loud. One gem. Once Mark's out, we can use the equity in the house for our new business. Jason says it's easy money. I leaned back in my chair and actually chuckled. Easy money. Right. Step 3 was psychological. Emily loved control, or at least the illusion of it. So I gave her some. I let her think she was winning small battles. She'd say, Jason's boys will need the bigger bedroom. I'd nod. Of course. We'll make it work. Then I'd quietly take Noah to the sporting goods store, let him pick out new gear, a better bike, fresh sneakers. On paper, Emily's new family had the space. But in spirit, Noah and I had the kingdom. She'd complain, you're barely present, Mark. You're cold. I'd smile faintly. Just focused. Focused on the fact that every word out of her mouth was another brick in the wall she didn't see me building. The crack in their fairy tale came faster than I expected. One evening, Jason's kids left the back gate open, and the dog ran off. Emily screamed at them. Jason shouted back, and for the first time, Noah saw her mask slip. You don't talk to my kids like that. Jason barked. They're not even your kids half the time. Emily snapped back. Silence. A long, ugly silence. Jason stormed out, slamming the door, while Emily stood in the kitchen, trembling with rage. Noah looked at me, wide-eyed. I just kept sipping my coffee. Storms blow hard, I murmured to him. But they always pass. That weekend, I made my move. I invited Emily and Jason to sit at the dining table. Calm, formal, like a family meeting. I've been thinking, I said, sliding a stack of papers across. About the future. Emily smirked, expecting me to beg for reconciliation. Jason puffed his chest like he was about to deliver some grand speech about fatherhood. But when they looked at the papers, their faces drained. It was the divorce petition, with every exhibit neatly attached: photos, texts, receipts, the works. Mark, Emily whispered, voice suddenly thin. What is this? This, I said evenly, is the beginning of your new life. No house, no equity, no custody, just you and Jason, with whatever you two can scrape together. Jason's jaw clenched. You can't do this. I leaned forward, voice low. Jason, you walked into my home. You kissed my wife in front of my son. You paraded your mess through my door. So yes, I can do this. And I already have. Emily's eyes darted to me, then the papers, then Jason. For the first time, she looked afraid. You wouldn't, she whispered. I smiled. You always underestimated me, Emily. That was your mistake. Because men like me, we don't fight in the open. We build in silence. And by the time you realize it's war, it's already over. They didn't argue. Not that night. Jason muttered something about getting a lawyer, but I could see the cracks forming. Emily tried to bluster, but her voice wavered. Noah, sitting on the stairs, watched it all with quiet triumph in his eyes. Later that night, when the house had finally gone still, he crept into my study. Dad, he said softly, are we going to be okay? I put a hand on his shoulder. We're already better than okay. We're free. And for the first time in weeks, I felt it. Not just strength, not just control, but peace. The kind you only get when you've been to the edge and decided to build a bridge instead of jumping. That was just the beginning. The real ending? That was still coming. And trust me, nobody, not even Emily, would see it coming until it hit. Jason lasted exactly 3 weeks under my roof before the shine wore off his new family man routine. 3 weeks of forced smiles, bad jokes, and pretending my house was his throne. 3 weeks of Emily pretending she was living some fairy tale while I just smiled, nodded, and let the rope tighten. It started with little things. Jason's boys fought with Noah over the Xbox, and when Noah beat them, they ran crying to Emily. Instead of parenting, she turned on Noah. "Can't you let them win sometimes?" she snapped. Noah squared his little shoulders. "They're guests. Guests don't get to win by default." I hid my smirk in my coffee. That kid sharper than she deserved. Then came the money. Jason wasn't used to being the one writing checks, mostly because he didn't have any money to write them with. I knew, because I'd already seen his bank statements through Emily's sloppy emails. But she didn't. She thought she'd traded stability for excitement, never realizing excitement doesn't pay the water bill. One night, while Jason was fumbling through his online banking, I accidentally walked past. His screen glowed bright red with overdraft warnings. "Everything good?" I asked casually. He slammed the laptop shut. "Fine. Don't worry about it." I raised my eyebrows, shrugged, and walked away. But I made sure Emily overheard. Plant the seed, let it grow. Meanwhile, my lawyer Marcus was moving faster than even I expected. He'd filed the petition, lined up hearings, and scheduled the financial disclosures. Emily, of course, ignored the paperwork until the sheriff served her at the door. Jason was there when it happened. She grabbed the envelope, rolled her eyes, and tossed it onto the counter like junk mail. "Don't worry," she told him. "Mark's just being dramatic. He won't follow through." Jason, though, wasn't so sure. His eyes flicked to me, nervous, like maybe he'd just realized the ground under him wasn't as solid as Emily promised. "You underestimate me too," I said quietly, passing him on my way to the fridge. He didn't answer. The real turning point came 2 days later. Emily had taken Jason's boys shopping, on my dime. Of course, though she didn't realize her access was about to disappear completely. Noah and I were at home, building a model plane at the kitchen table, when Jason came storming in. "Mark," he said, voice tight, "we need to talk." I didn't look up from the glue. "Do we?" "Yes." He sat down across from me, running a hand through that salon-perfect hair. "Look, man, I didn't come here to cause trouble. Emily loves me. I love her. But this setup, it's not working." I finally looked up, met his eyes. "You don't say." He leaned in, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. "She said once the divorce is final, she'll get the house. We'll refinance, use the equity to cover some debts, start fresh." I let him stew in the silence for a moment. Then I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Jason, she's not getting the house. She's not getting equity. She's not getting anything. This place is mine. Legally, on paper, signed and sealed. You're both squatters until the judge tells you otherwise." He blinked, throat working. "That's not what she told me." I leaned closer. "She tells everyone what they want to hear. But here's the thing, you and I, we deal in facts. And the fact is, you've tied yourself to a sinking ship." His jaw tightened. He stood abruptly, muttered something about going for a drive, and left. Noah watched him go, then looked at me. "He's scared." "Good," I said, clipping another piece of wing into place. Fear makes people honest. By the end of the month, the cracks weren't cracks anymore. They were chasms. Jason and Emily fought constantly. About money. About the kids. About the fact that Jason's car got repossessed right out of my driveway at 3 a.m., horn blaring as the tow truck hauled it away. Emily cornered me the next morning, mascara smudged, trying to hold her composure. "Did you know his car was in trouble?" she hissed. I stirred my coffee calm. "Of course." She gaped at me. "And you didn't say anything?" "Why would I?" "You didn't ask." Her lips tightened, but she didn't answer. For once, she had no comeback. Then came the piece de resistance, the business deal. Emily and Jason had been planning to launch some little side company, using her half of our assets. They even had a name picked out, New Horizon Investments. Cute, right? She'd been emailing vendors, signing documents, even promising a down payment she couldn't make. What she didn't know was that I'd already intercepted half those emails through her lazy iCloud sync. And what Jason didn't know was that Emily had promised different people different cuts of the pie. By the time I was done collecting, they'd both look like con artists, not entrepreneurs. So one night, I slid a new folder onto the counter in front of Emily. What's this? She asked suspiciously. Your business plan? I said. She frowned, flipped it open, and her face drained. Every email, every promise, every contradictory statement. Copies of Jason's debt filings stapled right on top. You went through my files? She demanded, voice shaking. No, I said evenly. I went through your lies. There's a difference. Jason walked in halfway through. He grabbed the papers, skimmed them, then turned on her. What the hell, Emily? You told me we had the money. She snapped. You told me you'd cover the rest. Their voices rose, sharp and ugly. Noah peeked around the corner, eyes wide, but I just waved him back upstairs. This wasn't a fight for kids to witness. Jason stormed out again, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled off the wall. Emily stood in the kitchen, shaking, glaring at me like I'd set the fire. You planned this, she spat. I sipped my coffee. No, I just watched you dig. That night, when the house finally went quiet, Noah came into my study again. Dad, he asked carefully, why don't you just kick them out already? I put down my pen. Because, son, revenge isn't just about winning. It's about timing. You don't swat a wasp midair. You wait until it's trapped under glass. He nodded slowly, thoughtful. That boy was learning lessons I never wanted him to. But if he had to learn them, at least he was learning them from me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of documents waiting for the next court date. Emily thought she still had cards to play. Jason thought he could bluff his way out. But me? I was already 10 moves ahead. And soon, very soon, they'd both realize that by the time I decide to strike, the game's already over. The courthouse smelled like stale coffee and polished marble, a mix of exhaustion and expensive janitorial services. I walked in wearing the same navy suit I'd worn to close million-dollar contracts, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I knew Emily expected me to show up looking broken. She arrived 10 minutes late, of course, Jason trailing behind her like a tired bodyguard. Her hair was perfect, her smile rehearsed, but her eyes flickered around the room like a gambler trying to read the dealer's face. Mark, she purred when she saw me, like we were still married, like this was just some lover's spat we'd laugh about later. I gave her a polite nod, the same nod I'd give a stranger holding open an elevator door. Nothing more. Jason cleared his throat. We don't need to do this, man. Let's just settle. Split things fair. Fair. I repeated softly, raising an eyebrow. That word doesn't mean what you think it does. Marcus, my lawyer, smirked as we took our seats. He had the confidence of a man who knew the game was already won. The judge entered. Papers shuffled, voices quieted, and the ritual began. Emily's lawyer, a slick young guy who probably still had student loans, stood up and launched into a speech about how Emily had dedicated her life to our marriage, how she deserved half the house, half the accounts, and a generous spousal support package to maintain the standard of living she'd grown accustomed to. I almost laughed out loud. Standard of living? She'd grown accustomed to wine-soaked brunches and Instagram selfies, not mortgages and taxes. But I let Marcus handle it. He rose slowly, methodical. Your Honor, he began, we have no issue with Emily seeking what she's legally entitled to. The problem is, what she believes she's entitled to does not exist. He handed over a thick binder. Every tab a landmine. Exhibit A, Marcus continued. Text messages between Emily and her extramarital partner, Jason, in which they openly mock my client and discuss plans to seize equity from the marital home. The judge adjusted her glasses, skimmed a page, and frowned. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Exhibit B, bank records showing multiple unauthorized withdrawals by Emily from joint accounts. Funds used not for household expenses, but for vacations and gifts with her partner. Emily's lawyer tried to object, but Marcus cut him down smoothly. The records are signed, time-stamped, and verified by the bank. There's no objection to facts, counsel. The judge nodded. Strike one. Exhibit C, Marcus said, almost casually, correspondence between Emily and various vendors promising funds for a so-called business venture, New Horizon Investments. These funds do not exist, but Emily misrepresented them as marital assets she could freely offer. That, Your Honor, is fraud. I didn't even look at her. I just watched the judge's pen scratch across her notes. Strike two. Emily's face drained of color. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering furiously, but the poor kid just shook his head. He was out of ammo before the fight had even started. Marcus closed the binder. Finally, Your Honor, we submit proof that the marital home and associated accounts are solely in my client's name. Deeds, titles, contracts, all signed before Emily began her extracurricular activities. Therefore, Emily is entitled to nothing beyond her personal belongings. Silence. Beautiful, heavy silence. The judge looked at Emily. Do you have a response? Emily tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This isn't fair. I finally turned my head, looked at her, and said evenly, You wanted fair. This is it. Strike 3. Court adjourned for the day, but the damage was done. Outside, reporters weren't waiting, but neighbors were. People talk. And when a woman storms out of a courthouse with mascara streaked down her cheeks, word spreads faster than fire. Jason tried to put a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged him off. She marched up to me instead, eyes blazing. You set me up, she hissed. No, I said calmly. You set yourself up. I just kept the receipts. Her lip trembled, not with guilt, but with rage. The kind of rage born from realizing the spotlight she craved now showed every flaw. Jason muttered, This isn't over. I gave him a thin smile. For you, maybe. For her, it's already finished. At home that night, Noah sat at the table with his homework spread out. He looked up as I walked in, studied my face. Well, he asked cautiously. I set down my briefcase, loosened my tie. We're free. He nodded once, then went back to his math problems. But I noticed the corner of his mouth twitch, almost a smile. The weeks that followed were like watching a building implode in slow motion. Emily moved out, dragging her suitcases into Jason's half-empty apartment across town. She tried to keep up appearances online, selfies with wine glasses, captions about new chapters and fresh starts. But behind the scenes, creditors started circling Jason. Without my money to prop them up, their fantasy collapsed fast. Noah showed me a TikTok one of Jason's kids posted, a shaky video of their dad yelling about bills while Emily slammed doors in the background. Happy family. The caption read, followed by a row of laughing emojis. I didn't comment. Didn't need to. Some things collapse all on their own. But I wasn't done yet. Revenge isn't just about stripping someone of comfort. It's about hitting them where they never expected. So one morning, I walked into my office with a fresh folder in hand. Inside, every shady promise Emily and Jason had made to their vendors, every overdraft notice, every fraudulent claim about future investments. I forwarded the whole package to a few choice recipients, the state licensing board, the IRS tip line, and Jason's two biggest creditors. Then I closed the folder and poured myself a coffee. By noon, Jason's phone was blowing up. By evening, he was pacing their apartment, shouting into the receiver. And by the end of the week, his so-called company was under audit. Emily had wanted excitement. Well, now she had it. One night, she called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was small, panicked. Mark, you ruined me. I stayed silent. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. Jason's drowning, the kids hate me, and I just need. I finally spoke. You told Noah he was a roadblock. You told me I was boring. You told Jason I was just a placeholder. You didn't need me then. Don't start now. She sobbed, begged, tried every trick in the book. But I ended the call with 3 words. Take care, Emily. Click. That night, Noah came downstairs, rubbing his eyes. Was that Mom? Yeah, I said softly. He hesitated. Do you hate her? I thought about it for a long moment. No, I finally said. Hate takes energy, and she doesn't get any more of mine. He nodded slowly, processing that. Then he climbed onto the couch next to me, leaned his head on my shoulder. We sat in silence, the kind that isn't empty but full of lessons, of endings, of new beginnings. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something stronger than revenge. Relief. Of course, I wasn't finished yet. The final play was still waiting. Something Emily wouldn't see coming until the curtain dropped. And trust me, when it did, she wouldn't just lose. She'd understand exactly what it means to underestimate a man who builds in silence, be why the timefall rolled around. Emily's world was already on fire. Jason's company had collapsed under audits. His debts tripled overnight, and creditors called him more than his own kids did. Emily tried to patch things together with Instagram posts about resilience and staying strong, but reality doesn't care about filters. The whispers started, too. Neighbors, friends, even her own family. They'd seen the court records, the evidence, the way Jason's car disappeared in the night. She couldn't spin it anymore. Meanwhile, Noah thrived. He joined the soccer team, nailed his science fair project, and started talking about college. He carried himself differently now, stronger, steadier. The storm hadn't broken him. It had forged him. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Emily and Jason were drowning, I had one last card up my sleeve: the house. She still believed that, somehow, she'd claw her way back into it. That one day, a judge would give her half, or Jason would miraculously find the money to buy me out. She didn't realize I'd already set things in motion to make sure she'd never even drive past it without remembering what she lost. The plan came together in silence. First, I contacted a realtor friend and arranged for a private listing. The house, the one Emily assumed was still her safety net, went on the market. Quietly. Within 3 weeks, I had a buyer, a young couple with 2 toddlers and another on the way. They loved the backyard, the school district, the kitchen Emily used to brag about. When Emily found out, she stormed into my office, shaking with rage. "You can't sell my house," she screeched. I leaned back in my chair. "Correction. It's my house. And it's sold." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't." I slid the paperwork across the desk. "Already did." She grabbed the papers, skimmed them, and went pale. Every signature, every stamp, every notarized detail, ironclad. "You're a monster," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "I'm a builder. And builders don't live in ruins." She slammed the papers down and stormed out. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. The walls of her fantasy had officially caved in. The closing date came fast. The new family moved in, their laughter echoing through rooms that had once held Emily's staged dinner parties and Jason's hollow boasts. Noah and I had already settled into a smaller place across town. Not as big, not as flashy, but ours. Peaceful. Emily tried one last trick. She called Noah, asking if he wanted to come stay with her for the weekend. He looked at me, unsure. I told him the choice was his. He shook his head. "She made her choice, Dad. I'm making mine." That was the moment I knew, whatever scars this had left, he was going to be fine. Better than fine. And then came the final play. The one nobody saw coming. That it happened at the town's annual fall gala, a charity event Emily never missed because she loved the cameras. I hadn't planned on going, but Marcus insisted. "Trust me," he said with that shark smile. "This is where you finish it." So I showed up. Navy suit, polished shoes, calm as ever. Emily was already there, clinging to Jason's arm like a lifeline, pretending the whispers didn't exist. Halfway through the evening, the host announced the major donors. One by one, names flashed on the screen: business owners, families, the usual suspects. And then, my name. But not just mine. The Mark and Noah Foundation. Emily's head snapped up. Jason blinked. The screen displayed the details: a trust fund, seeded with the proceeds from the house sale, dedicated to scholarships for kids of single-parent households. The applause was polite but steady. The whispers, though, those were loud. People turned to Emily, their eyes sharp, their smiles thin. She realized in that moment, the house she thought she'd live in forever had become the legacy she could never touch. My legacy. Noah's name on it. Not hers. She cornered me after, her voice low and venomous. "You did this just to humiliate me." I met her eyes, steady. "No. I did this so Noah knows what real building looks like. You tore things down. I built something new." Her lips trembled. For once, she had no words. Jason tugged her arm, muttered something about leaving. They slipped out into the night, shadows shrinking by the second. I stayed. Not for the applause, not for the spotlight, but for Noah, who stood beside me, proud, shoulders squared, finally free of her shadow, not with fists or fire, not with screaming matches or broken glass, but with silence, with precision, with a man who everyone underestimated standing one step ahead until the curtain dropped. Emily lost everything she thought she owned. Jason lost the fantasy he thought he'd stolen. And me? I didn't just win. I built a future where Noah would never doubt who stood by him when the world tried to break apart. Cruel revenge? Maybe. Unexpected? Absolutely. But the truth? The cruelest thing I ever did to Emily was also the simplest. I moved on. Without her. And I made sure she could never forget it.